Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This episode has been brought to you by the Wine to Wine Business Forum 2022. This year will mark the 9th edition of the forum to be held on November 7th and 8th of 2022 in Verona, Italy. This year will be an exclusively in-person edition. The main theme of the event will be all-round wine communication, and tickets are on sale now. The second early bird discount will be available until September 18th. For more information, please visit us at winetowine.net.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Cynthia Chaplin, and this is Voices. Every Wednesday, I will be sharing conversations with international wine industry professionals, discussing issues in diversity, equity, and inclusion through their personal experiences working in the field of wine. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your pods. Welcome to Voices. This is me, Cynthia Chaplin, and today I am so pleased to welcome Gary Green. He's the co-owner and CEO at Mt Yengo Wines in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales in Australia. And Mt Yengo is the only Aboriginal-owned winery in Australia, where Gary's making a huge impact by inspiring people to sort of bridge the cultural divide through educating and promoting Indigenous Australian art and contributing to scholarships at the National Indigenous Culinary Institute. So welcome to the show today, Gary. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Hi, thanks very much for having me, Cynthia.
Great pleasure. So I know you were originally in the beef business and sort of delivering Wagyu beef to food lovers all around Melbourne and Sydney. So how did you get into wine, and what inspired you to launch your original wine company, Gondwana Wines, in 2016?
Yeah, so Gondwana Wines was actually a bit of a brainchild of myself and my business partner and founding partner, Ben Hansberry. I really wanted to tackle the negative stereotype around Aboriginal people and alcohol, but at the same time, I wanted to do it in a positive way where we promoted with authenticity Aboriginal art and culture, not only to Australia but to the world. And at the same time, I really wanted to use this new media, being a wine bottle, to really break down the barriers and I guess the glass ceiling about what the perception is of an Aboriginal business, so that, you know, we're not just stereotyped as art, craft and tourism business, that we can be, you know, like you said before, I have a high-end Wagyu business. I do a lot with native foods and a number of other products. To go into the wine business for me, or the wine industry, that was my main driver. It was really about creating, I guess, social change and a change of the narrative around the perception of Aboriginal people and alcohol.
Well, I love the idea of breaking the glass ceiling with a wine bottle. I think that's fantastic in and of itself. I know you went on to rebrand from Gondwana to Mt Yengo in 2019 with your business partner, Ben, as you said. And Ben's not Aboriginal. So how do you infuse your joint culture and your values and mix those together with non-Indigenous Australians to take your goals forward of, you know, changing up the stereotypes? How do you and Ben blend and deal with, you know, a consumer base that is primarily probably not Indigenous Australians?
Yeah, so in 2019, we rebranded to Mt Yengo, and that was because we facilitated a deal with a small vineyard up in the Hunter Valley that sat at the base of Mt Yengo. And we got the permission from the Wonnarua people, which is the traditional owners of that area, to use Mt Yengo as the name, which means meeting place. And we thought that was, you know, a really special name, and it really encapsulated what we were trying to do moving forward. I think the main thing is that everyone talks, you know, it's not just based in Australia, but everyone talks globally about reconciliation and how, you know, First Nations people and non-Indigenous people need to work together. And I think I like to call it, you know, cross-cultural hybrid economics, where, you know, our business model is infused and the whole undertone of our business model is based on First Nations culture around respect for country or caring for country, respect for our own people and others. And, you know, in Aboriginal culture, something's not mine, it's always ours. We were a tribal and we're a village and we all supported each other. So I think, I bring all the cultural aspect, and now, we're so lucky to have, the most amazing business partner who's came into our business which is Wayne Quillam. So Associate Professor Wayne Quillam. Wayne Quillam's another First Nations business person and world-renowned photographer and artist. So, Wayne was originally our artist and brought in on the journey that Ben and I set forward. And I think it comes where to create this business model, we needed the skills of the oldest inhabitants, being that cultural authenticity, that ability of like I said before, around that caring for country and everything else, and then infuse that with, our newest inhabitants, which has the technology to be able to do the bottling, understand the wine, and everything like that. So I think, it's a natural synergy together to have, both cultures come together.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important, especially these days where, we're really opening our eyes to a lack of diversity and a lack of inclusion, to bring people together. And wine is a great way of doing that in so many ways. It is a natural product, and it does require, land that can be historically and culturally important. So it's a great concept of bringing those things together. You just said also that when you founded the company, one of your underlying principles was to break the stereotype around Aboriginal people and alcohol, which is usually a negative stereotype. I know you're a member of the Gamilaraay Nation. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong.
Yeah, Gamilaraay.
Thank you. One of the 4 largest Indigenous nations in Australia. And your mom has Danish-Irish heritage, so you come from a lot of culturally rich, background. How are you harnessing your background, your personal background, to create such a positive story and a positive image around Aboriginal people and alcohol? I'm kind of curious where that original negative stereotype came from and how you're finding ways to mitigate that sort of stigma, take that negative aspect away.
Well, I think in any culture there's negative aspects where the media sensationalise things, and I think Aboriginal culture is see it, touch it, feel it, taste it. It's rich, it's beautiful. Like you only have to look at the art on the bottle. It pops. It's got a story behind it. It's living. It's breathing. It's not your traditional dot painted art. It's abstract, but it's got meaning and stories behind it. I really wanted to bring that, to the world. Like I've been lucky enough that I embrace all my culture and I embrace all my heritage. I'm not. Some people ask, oh, are you half Aboriginal? Are you half caste? Are you things like that? No, I'm Aboriginal. I respect and admire my other heritage, but I live sort of my life by, those Aboriginal cultural beliefs. And, I've been lucky enough, to get an education and to be a voice. And I think, like I said earlier, for me to be able to represent my people and my culture and do it with authenticity and the support. And at first, I must admit, some of my Aboriginal family were like, even they sort of bought into that narrative. You can't have an alcohol business. It can't be an Aboriginal alcohol business. And I said, why not, Aunt? Why can't we as Aboriginal people, we're not all alcoholics. We don't all have a problem with alcohol. There's alcohol problems across every culture. I said, let's really focus so that, that next generation, our kids are our future. I hope that, they listen to like podcasts like this, or they see our story and they go, gee whiz, that young Aboriginal boy that grew up to be able to, break a negative stereotype, and he was the first Aboriginal person to open a wine company in Australia. If I can do that, imagine what the next generation can do. And I think that's what sort of drives us at Mt Yengo is, just constantly trying to get positive media and positive affirmations, not just for our company, but for Aboriginal art and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back in the day, we had so much more of a mentorship going on, especially, culturally, and especially where people lived with their family, and we've kind of lost that. So being a role model in the way that you are doing, and looking, towards the next generation, and being a leader is really important, especially when you are trying to combat, a negative stereotype that could have been media created and certainly media sustained. So it's not an easy job, Gary. I'm so impressed with what you're doing. We know that Australia has this long history of wine production. We all study it when we're doing our wine studies. At least 200 years of winemaking there. But as you touched on, there's kind of a dark history about it. A lot of Aboriginal people were resettled. And I know you've been working with the First Nations people and Aboriginal and Indigenous leaders and elders, to make sure that culture is valued. You said you got their permission to start your winery in Hunter Valley. And you've pointed out something that I think is really important, that Australian winemaking has a lot of Italians and a lot of Greeks, a lot of immigrants on the ground there, and people whose culture has a lot of similarities with Aboriginal culture, family, extended family. How are you finding it, putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, to form partnerships and get your philosophy out there, and to sort of revitalize the Indigenous Australian aspect of the winemaking industry?
Yeah, I think like I touched on earlier, like the media and the public always want to focus on the negative, and I think without being toxic positive, I acknowledge, and I think we need to acknowledge what's happened in the past, and there are some truth tellings that need to be undertaken. But I like to see it in the light that our eyes are put in the front of our head to look forward. My grandfather used to tell me. And, we need to acknowledge, like I said, what happened in the past. But I think, it's so amazing to see, to have, in our wine business, we've got like the O'Leary Walker family from O'Leary Wines. They're one of our winemakers. They're a reputable South Australian family that are supporting our vision. And, they're helping us make our own great wine. And these are families who have this long tradition. And yes, in the past there might have been atrocities, displacement, but now we're getting these families to buy in under the spirit of reconciliation, and I think it's great. Like I like to think that if when we opened Gondwana and then it was Mt Yengo, if we could change the narrative or the perception of what one person thought, and we could educate them, and they opened a wine bottle at a dinner party and they went, oh my God, that's a really good drop of wine. That's a Barossa Shiraz or an Adelaide Hill Chardonnay. Well, what's this art? What's this about this Aboriginal art and this Aboriginal? Wow, that's a good. So there's a positive interaction, and I like to think, without, like I said, without being toxic positive, that has a ripple effect across the pond. And I like to think that we say at Mt Yengo, embrace the change that's in every bottle. And I think slowly but surely we're educating people, and you can't educate someone until they're engaged. And I think what we're trying to do with Mt Yengo through supporting the Culinary Institute out there, like we're stocked 3 varietals Coles supermarkets through their vintage sellers first choice liquor mart. This is a major Australian retail supermarket chain that has a corporate and social responsibility, but they've bought into our product and our story to help not only sell great wine to consumers, but also to help us together as an Indigenous business and a non-Indigenous business walk together as one to tell this story about our culture. And I think that's an amazing thing to be a part of.
Italian Wine Podcast, brought to you by Mama Jumbo Shrimp.
Absolutely. It's so important, especially when you think about the impact of just one person, one bottle, one glass of wine at a time. It sounds small, but you do create a wave. And I think that's an amazing way to sort of promote and move forward what you're doing. And you mentioned about your labels and Wayne, and I know that you've been committed at Mt Yengo to these brand labels that feature art from Indigenous Australians. And I had a quick look, now I'm not going to lie, on the website, and many of your labels represent really strong Aboriginal women, but they are not in any way, shape, or form like the dot paintings, as you said. Tell us about Wayne, tell us about the artist and why you chose him and what he's doing and what his images said to you that you put them on your bottles.
So initially when we reached out to Wayne, like I'm all about, like I said before, breaking the perception. I like to think I'm an undercover brother. I'm a fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, proud Aboriginal Australian, proud Gamilaraay man. I've got definitely some Danish, Irish features in me, but I've also got many Aboriginal. And my mum used to always say to me, son, you can put as much milk in tea as you want, but it's still tea. And I think based off that, why I reached out to Wayne was his art wasn't atypical skeleton art or dot painted art. It was abstract, and it really showed what I like to think is the diversity of Aboriginal people and Aboriginal culture, from traditional Aboriginal people who live in, remote communities, in the central desert to the coastal communities and everyone in between, And I think Wayne, we're so lucky now that Wayne actually has become an equity partner. He started off as our artist. Now he's an equity partner and bought into our vision moving forward. And, Wayne's a world award-winning photojournalist, photographer, and artist. He just recently won the Australian National Portrait Prize, out of the whole of Australia. He's an amazing, amazing human. And, his art speaks volumes of our culture and him. And, women in our community and in our culture, they're our matriarchs. They are, we call them Mother Earth, Mother Nature. They're the matriarchs of our society. And, it's really interesting when Wayne originally did, I believe it was his Luana series that adores on some of our bottles. They're pictures of prominent Aboriginal women. But then the abstract nature, which I think is beautiful, is they're all photographs from parts of country that those women come from. So if they're from the sea people or sea country, that there's parts where Wayne's photographed out on country with them people of kelp and seaweed and rocky coastlines and water, and it's all infused digitally to make, that masterpiece that, is Wayne's art and is on our bottle. And, I think Wayne's worked in so many communities and with so many mob for so many years. It's a real pleasure for me, like I said, as a proud Gamilaraay man, to stand there with Wayne and be able to promote this culture and continue on this, cultural education journey through art and also wine.
I have to say, when I was looking at the labels, and for anyone who hasn't seen them, I recommend go on Mt Yengo's website, because they are really compelling images of, as you said, like very strong female figures within their landscape. They really were evocative, and they spoke to me of sort of where you are and where your wine is coming from. And for me, wine can be artwork too. So I really like the idea of taking the time to carefully select an artist whose work obviously clearly represents everything in your ethos and put those labels on the bottle. So I'm looking forward to actually holding one in my hand someday, because the images are really, truly striking. So good choice.
I think on that too, to, further credit to Wayne and what I think where art transcends so many boundaries. This year at the Sydney Vivid Festival, the Vivid Light Festival, which actually coincided on Reconciliation Week, Wayne's art was actually projected as part of the light show every night on the Sydney Harbour Bridge pylons. Now, that art, a few of those pieces of Wayne's art were actually the labels on our bottles. So, I felt so honoured for Wayne and also for Mt Yengo, but more so for Wayne, that this is probably one of the most, other than the Opera House in Sydney, if you think of Australia and you said Sydney, Australia, normally people think of the Opera House or the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So to have this beautiful artwork projected every night for the local community to see, but also, photographed and videoed and televised around the globe, what an amazing statement for reconciliation to show the diversity of Wayne's beautiful work and everything it encapsulates, tied on one of the most prominent landmarks in modern Australia.
That's so incredible, and you put it all into one sentence, tying the entire past, present, and future together into one, kind of living, moving, breathing exhibition on, a world iconic landmark. That's really, how cool. I'm going to have to look that up on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll send you some photos. I'll send you. It's amazing, and like I said earlier in the conversation, what people need to understand about Aboriginal culture is it's living, it's breathing, it's see it, touch it, feel it, taste it. So to see it come alive on the Opera House, and, I must admit, I was so proud for Wayne, for all his hard work and everything he's done in community and the most amazing work he does with his art and his photography. To have that, and talking to Wayne post that, he was so proud, and so he should have been. But that was, to me, as an Aboriginal person, that was an amazing statement to be able to say to all of my friends, whether they're, black, white, blue or brindle, hey, go down and see my business partner, his artwork, and some of that art features on our bottles is projected on the Harbour Bridge. And I think, I talked earlier about inspiring our young ones and our little people. It's not only, First Nations young ones, it's all those, every other culture that was there that saw it and went, wow, this is mainstream. This is what's normal now. And, and I think that we all talk about reconciliation and moving forward together as one. I thought that was a really amazing and lovely statement that brought it all together.
And it's so validating for everything that Wayne is doing, everything that Mt Yengo is doing. I love that great feeling of acceptance and validation and really coming together that way. But it gives me another question, when we're talking about Aboriginal place names and Aboriginal art, things like that. A lot of these things have huge spiritual significance for Australian Indigenous groups. And I'm just wondering how you and Wayne, I'm sure, can help people draw a line between supporting and paying respect to Aboriginal culture and cultural appropriation. I know when I see Australian wine in the shops, often it will have dot art paintings and things. When are people crossing a line that they should really be stepping back and thinking about?
I think the best way is communication. That's the key. Like, if in doubt, ask. And I think so many people just go out and do instead of consultation with, Aboriginal traditional owners or, the clan groups and the like. And I think that's the best advice I can give anyone. Like, I can only speak for myself and my immediate family. I can't speak on behalf of the Gamilaraay Nation or on behalf of broader, Aboriginal Australians. I can only speak for me and my family. And I think, in that regard, it's, embrace that community consultation, sit down there. Like, Aboriginal people want their culture, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, they want their culture out there where, it's not, a top secret thing. And I think the more that companies and community work together, I think that'll help, rule out a lot of, the cultural sort of misrepresentation that can sometimes be seen out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's really wise advice too, to keep a conversation going and to ask questions if you're not sure. I think that's probably the best way we can make sure that people aren't doing things that are disrespectful, even when they have the best of intentions. So
yeah, and I think, it's great that, I know my time in Australia here, we obviously have Australia Day or Invasion Day on the 26th of January, which is always a very sort of hot topic. We have Reconciliation Week and NAIDOC Week. They're the two other big weeks of the year. And it's great. Like, my phone rings so much, and it's so many non-Indigenous people ringing me up saying, hey, Gary, I'd like to understand what I can actually do to support Aboriginal people and Aboriginal businesses, but I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to overstep the mark. Can you guide me? And it's so refreshing because even sort of 5-7 years ago, my phone didn't ring like that. So it's so amazing to see in mainstream society that, people are a lot more aware and conscious about what they're doing.
Well, I'm really glad that you've given people someone they can look to for answers and, someone they can look to for that kind of leadership and mentorship, because clearly you're doing it in a very diplomatic and spiritually generous way, non-judgmental and really wanting the best for everyone. It's very obvious in everything you do. So I'm, that leadership, you're very humble about it, but you are definitely giving people a point of reference, which is needed, and you're filling a gap that I think is super important. So I thank you for that. But I want to go back to something you said earlier about everything else that Mt Yengo is doing, as if that weren't enough, which is plenty. Every bottle that you sell, donations are being made to the National Indigenous Culinary Institute. So I did not know what that was myself. And so let's talk about that a little bit. What is the Institute and what made you want to get involved with them? What are they doing?
Yeah, so the National Indigenous Culinary Institute, I'm actually lucky enough that a year and a half ago, I got appointed as a board member to the National Indigenous Culinary Institute. It was set up over 10 years ago by a number of prominent Australian chefs who worked in hatted restaurants, like the Neil Perrys of the world and the Jill DePlay, who's the chief editor of the Good Food Guide and things like that. And it's designed to train young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander chefs and put them in the fine dining and hatted restaurants in Australia. And, we spoke before off air, before we came on, and I think it's so amazing that, for me, being in where so much of my wine is sold in the hospitality industry, to be able to be in a position to be a board member, but now to be able to help the Culinary Institute not rely on government grants, but a commercial outcome. And I've got a simple saying, you don't get social outcomes without commercial outcomes, or it's not sustainable. And I think this is a great way where, we as a business are actually giving back, but we're actually investing into the future storytellers for our business and other native products and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander businesses in Australia, because it's elevation by association. When these chefs, and we've got so many qualified chefs that are already out in some of the best restaurants in Australia, they are our natural cultural storytellers. How good would it be if you're sitting in a fine dining restaurant, the chef comes out, the chef says, hey, this is a native ingredient, this is what it is, it's really well paired with Mt Yengo Wines. Do you understand about the story behind Mt Yengo? Can I tell you this story? And I think, we're in a very unique space where there was very low representation, and the Culinary Institute does an amazing job with our training and retention. And, I give a shout out to restaurants like Rockpool Group Australia, Icebergs. They have taken these students on, Margaret at Double Bay with Neil Perry, and it's so amazing to see these backstories of these chefs, but then the pride that they're now inspiring other young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. But what they're also doing is they're in a whole new sector where there was low representation before, that they're interacting with all these other people and all these other cultures, and they're passing on that positive cultural message. And I just think that's, amazing. And, Mt Yengo Wines are so proud of our association with the Culinary Institute, and I know it'll be one that continues forever and a day.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I'm a wine educator myself, and investment has to go hand in hand with education. It's not enough to educate somebody. You have got to give them the financial backing that allows them to continue, learning and growing and being able to take up jobs in, sophisticated situations. And then, as you said, be the storyteller For me, in my life as a wine presenter, the storytelling is everything. And without that, you lose the thread. It just becomes alcohol. So I love that you're investing and educating. I think those two things should never be separated, or we'll just fail in our mission to be more inclusive in the industry. So
no, I totally agree. And you have to look at our culture. Like, we're the longest continuing surviving culture in the world. Like, we've got carbon dating of over 60,000 years for remains in Australia. We're an oral culture. We're natural storytellers. We pass down our stories through song, dance, and orally. So, it makes perfect sense that, we continue in the kitchen and in the restaurants to continue to tell the story and pass on, to all of these other people, our beautiful stories about our culture, our native ingredients. And, it's been so humbling to see so many of the hatted restaurants and the fine dining restaurants around the globe, embracing native products. Like this year on the Australian television series MasterChef, the most amazing chef, Mindy Woods, and I'll give her a plug. Hello, sister. Mindy Woods at Kakala at Byron Bay. What she's doing with native food and native food ingredients is amazing. And I think, food goes with wine hand in hand. So our support of the Culinary Institute, not only does it educate, but it assists us as part of our marketing as well. So it's a social and commercial synergy that is amazing for all parties. Everyone's a winner.
Absolutely. And I wasn't going to bring it up, but I am a long-standing, decades fan of MasterChef Australia. It's my favorite of all the MasterChefs because I do think it has the biggest spirit and actually does more teaching than most of the other MasterChefs around the world. So are you going to invite MasterChef up to Mt Yengo?
Oh, well, Mindy Woods has so generously offered to stock the wine at Kakala, which is a Aboriginal-inspired restaurant in Byron Bay on Bundjalung country, very close to where I live now. And, I'd love to get, some of the master chefs or, any of those cooking shows where they could come up and actually cook on country and hear that story. But not only from me, but, one of the things that, part of that education process is getting some of those chefs out with the traditional owners where those native products come from and where our wine comes from, and actually talking to the local traditional owners and the local mob and hearing their story. Like, I see Mt Yengo as a great conduit and a connector for people to, dip their toe in the water around Aboriginal art, culture, but then hopefully it's just the first step on a long and continuing journey and a journey of lifelong learning around our culture and embracing that acceptance of our culture.
Well, it's also so interesting how the education has spread globally by, television programs like MasterChef Australia, where I think, people in Iowa in the United States or, Berkshire in the UK or Verona here in Italy, never heard of myrtle or any of these other things and have learned so much through that exposure. So I think what you're doing, getting exposure out there, creating these alliances with chefs, with the Institute, is educating more people than you know, and having a broader reach than probably you expected when you started.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Incredible.
Totally amazing. Like our wine's stocked everywhere.
Yeah, it's incredible, except not in Italy, unfortunately. We have to rectify that.
Well, not yet, but we are working on expanding. Like I said, we're in the United States already through a really amazing company called Legend Imports, and that started our little journey there. We've got Coles, like we said earlier, with a national contract for 3 varietals, and they've been an amazing supporter.
Well, yeah, you just signed that deal not long ago. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
So tell me about this deal. What you've given them 3 varietals. What have you given them? What's going out there?
So that's a Shiraz, a Pinot Gris, and a Sparkling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's something there for everyone. And I think they're very popular varietals here in Australia. It gives us good market coverage across the board to tell that message. And it's been very well received. Coles actually came as part of Reconciliation Week. They brought near 30 of their senior management across the liquor business, the Indigenous engagement team, and strategy and management. And they actually came to a wine tasting, but it was more than a wine tasting. It was a cultural immersion experience put on by Mt Yengo, where we sat around and we all talked and we all shared. And Wayne spoke about his art firsthand, and spoke about his experiences and my experiences and the journey. And it was so amazing to see so many of these high-level executives and category managers for such a major organisation have such buy-in for our product and our story, so that they could go back and educate, their staff further on our story. And I think that was just, phenomenal.
Yeah, it's incredible, especially when you've got, a partnership going with such a huge, corporate organization like Coles.
They handle the majority of our wholesale, and it was so amazing. Bidfood got 10 of their sales staff on an hour call with Wayne, Ben, and myself to learn our story and learn about our product and learn about our culture and our not only our value proposition and our price point, but all this other intrinsic capital that they've gone out now to their clients. And they've gotten us the most amazing traction and opportunities that are here already, but also in the pipeline with some other major corporations here in Australia, which we're really happy to be part of that sort of Bidfood network as well.
So all of this that you're doing sounds like you don't have one single free minute in your day. But I do want to ask you, I always ask this question when I find somebody as inspiring as you are, and I can tell that you are full of ideas and you're so passionate about what you do. So I have to ask, what are your hopes and dreams for Mt Yengo over the next couple of years? You are filled with sort of this verve for what you're doing. And I just want to know, what outside of the box things have you got in mind coming up?
Yeah, so we're obviously looking at expanding our export markets. We definitely like to go over to Italy. We're working currently with the United Kingdom. But one of the other projects that we've been looking at is looking at how, using our business model, that we can actually help and assist other First Nations people in other countries. So one of the projects that we've looked at is with one of the major cruise ship lines to look at how we can actually get traditional artists and First Nations artists in countries like Vanuatu, Fiji and the like, where predominantly they don't have wine growing areas and good wine, to be able to get those traditional owners to give us the art and the story to pair it with some really good Australian wine, so that when people are at some of those resorts, at some of those, on the cruise ships and things like that, that they're actually getting a localized story. So I think for Mt Yengo, we're about, our business model is service before self. How can we serve others before we serve ourselves? And we think that's our sort of company ethos. So, I'd love to see over the next 2 or 3 years, Mt Yengo, we've established ourselves now both domestically and we're growing internationally, how that we can leverage off the great work that we've achieved so far. We can leverage that to assist not only First Nations people here, but First Nations people in other countries. And we can continue that educational platform of hopefully educating and inspiring all people, to walk that path together as one under the spirit of reconciliation.
Well, Gary, I don't think we're going to get any better than that. I think that is a great dream and a great vision. I can't thank you enough for coming on today and sharing all your thoughts and your experiences with Mt Yengo. It's such a success story. And as you said, it's something that younger generations can look to and feel a part of and feel proud of and aspire to do similar things. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we wish you every success in the near future.
No, thank you so much for having me and letting me, it's podcasts like this and people like yourself that, assist us in telling our story, and, forever thankful and grateful for the opportunity.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode brought to you by the Wine to Wine Business Forum 2022. This year will mark the 9th edition of the forum to be held on November 7th and 8th, 2022 in Verona, Italy. Remember, the second early bird discount on tickets will be available until September 18th. For more information, please visit us at winetowine.net. Hi guys, I'm Joy Livingston and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to ItalianWinePodcast.com.